Howdy, friendos and fam squads. So I am back with my second narration, or rather, I did the fucking same thing. Uh, you, part of this is, experiencing the hero's journey with me. Wherein I learn how to post commentate on my own shit. Gross. So bear with me. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. But I'm coming at you with my next game, my last game in my first pool against the Shake It Up. So I guess bleh. Another thing I need to stop. I feel I'm sorry. Every time that I start one of these, I look back at my last one and think about what I could do better, and then I still do some of the things that I wanted to do better, but you don't have to hear any of that, but it's just some shit, man. It's tough. I'm not good at this, and I'm sorry, but I hope that you're gleaning something from it all the same. But yeah, historical context. So I just got off running these two teams, and I feel like it kept a pretty broad aspect on what I was going to bring, whereas Shake, he was actually doing surprisingly not great. He's actually 0-2 by the time this game starts, which is interesting for sure. I think that, he played Male, who surprised him in a way, and Chill Shadow, who I regard them both as good players, though, Male doing as well as he did, for pretty much everyone, it was a bit of surprise. Again, I'm his friend. I think that he's a good player, and I'm happy that he did well, but it was unexpected for him to be doing 0-2 at this point. So I think that he was, really thirsty for a win, so I was a little bit nervous. No lie, because he's a very solid player. I think that, he gets flack, but, because most of the time he just cheeses with, either some goofy auto win type click button shit or stall, but he is a talented player who is probably one of the most successful tour players in recent memory. So I was fretting this game, but that being said, I noticed that rather than taking that approach that I guess he is so widely renowned for, he decided to instead sidestep some of the typical prep for those kind of stall or, for instance, Veil matchups that he was, expected for, and went for some more traditional bulky offense, a lot of, like P2 plus ground type stealth rocker, general builds. So I was prepping more for that than anything, and what I noticed in particular was that he was almost never ready for a Choice Banded Escavalier, which is a Pokemon that I don't think many people are prepared for. And mind you, I'm the only guy that I think has ever used Quillfish, but yeah, it is absolutely vicious to his kind of teams, because I've seen a lot of the Choice Scarf Guard, which is a huge pursuit target, something that you can really piece apart a balance for and punish, because they usually reserve that for the mid game, and there's not a whole lot of pursuit, so it's kind of free to do whatever it desires, and Escavalier punishes that. Plus, Banded Meghorn has just so few switch-ins. There's sort of Gligar, but you can kind of just ram into it regardless. Unless it has knockoff, you're not going to get punished too greatly for it, and inevitably it's either forced to, roost and take that neutral hit, which does a million, or just, fodder it off for a lot of chip. Registeel isn't great versus it, etc., etc., etc. And, what I decided to pair it down with, and I guess this is as good a time as any to get into the thing itself, because you've already seen what it looked like at preview for my last thing if you've been watching, so, whatever. So, we're seeing the Banded Escavalier, strong-ass Pokemon, and I just started to, it's a bit of a hybrid spread. I, for the life of me, don't recall exactly what the HP investment is. I'm sure I can tell you if you want, specifics on that, do feel free to leave a comment. I can fish up what exactly I was shooting for with that particular bulk investment, though I know that, obviously I was trying to creep something like an AV King, which it hasn't gotten seen as maybe at all, but I think it's a decent Pokemon right now. And Snorlax and what have you. It's just creeping that general 30 base benchmark that is moderately important. So, got that boy, got my complimentary Stealth Rocker in Nido Queen. Haven't been using that a whole lot, and I feel like it is the kind of thing that, benefits a lot from this kind of structure, something that's, to, pick off some of the, all-purpose bulky facets, much in the same way that, Goodra functioned in the Araquanid team I was talking about in my previous video. I've got that removal that allows something like, a bulky AOA to function as both a, defensively functional member, being, the Stealth Rocker. It's a fight resist, it's a electric immunity, but it also can kind of go in once certain things like your Milotics or your Cresselias or what have you are, otherwise pressured. I went with a uniquely bulky spread. Timid is the most conventional now, just because, a lot of people are really scared for Queen. There's a lot of Pokemon sitting in that speed tier, things like Dhelmise and whatnot. You want to, there's a desire to outpace them. But I think that there is just as much merit in running fatter spreads or, anything like that. Queen has so much variance in, what's generally, one set. Like, outside of Earth Power, I think that, and Ice Beam. Ice Beam, I think, is a little too key to let go of. You can pretty much slap on so many things on the AOA Queen. Stealth Rock, sometimes you can get rid of it on, like, a Gigalith build, or even like a Reggie build. For T-Spikes, Taunt, Toxic, Thunderbolt. I actually think Thunder might be okay. I was actually giving some heed to Thunder over Sludge Wave because it nets some significant KOs on stuff like Milotic, which I can give you the numbers on at some point later, but it is an interesting option, Thunder, because it's one of those moves that you use sparingly to the point where it's not like you're exceedingly burdened by the low accuracy. But yeah, Focus Blast also good, because P2 exists. Toxic, mostly because, it's that catch-all on the P2 and the Cresselia, and something that, actively forces them to take a Toxic is pretty darn good. But yeah, there's a lot of variance, and I ran something a little bulkier. Again, fuck if I don't recall what the spread does exactly, and I can also tell you because, but know that I went for something slightly beefier, and it was very much intentional. And this is actually, I guess this is kind of my facilitator for this team, and I guess I've been kind of banking on trapping a little bit at this point, so hopefully, I might have to vary it up for my following games, but we'll see. Maybe I'll just cheese my way through the entire fucking tour, but, yeah, Block, Calm Mind, Slowking. It is pretty darn good at forcing in certain responses, because right now Slowking kind of generates a pretty specific response. It is, a lot of people, when seeing the itemless king, will say, like, presumably assume for something that they can just, slap a Toxic on and be pretty much safe in that. And to that end, it allows me to effectively get off the block and trap things like Cresselia, like Umbreon, like bulky Steels, that kind of thing. And it is pretty nifty in that regard. It's also a decent, loose fighter check, because it can stomach the knockoff better than most would anticipate, because, they don't expect a sizable defense investment, nor a non-knockable item, and I can fire back with the reasonably strong, not, super strong, but, Vortex to pop them off there. And Off that, we got the remaining facets of the defensive core. I think that I incorporated Umbreon in large part due to my susceptibility to sharks, especially special variants in my previous weeks. Umbreon's great for that. It also kind of allows me to play the long game should a situation warrant it. I have been, building my teams in such a fast and loose manner. I feel like someone that's, really doing their homework and really shooting for a really honed matchup might consider a decent option to be just, playing some harder stall, something that can really outlast what I've been going for. So I decided to, really beef up the longevity of my team with Umbreon on this team. And, Umbreon, it's been seeing a lot less use recently, which is understandable. A lot of people have been kind of teching towards it, but I think that it's still a very useful Pokemon. And, the activity it possesses, both in, synchronize, punishing, scald fishing, foul play, etc., etc. It is pretty darn useful. The speed is kind of out there, but I run 36 for Jolly Mega Bomastow. Jolly max speed Mega Bomastow hits, I think, 173 or 174. I'm not quite remembering the exact number. I know I outspeed it by a point, but I don't want to fuck up with the dimensions because I know that does that from past experiences. So I'm learning a little bit. But yeah, I go for that, and it's kind of a neat tech on a Bomastow. I know that I've used max speed Timida Bomastow on that team that Pokemon used, that Sharpedo Spike stack he used. So, I think it's a decent set, but I digress. Then Gligar. Everyone will say how much default Gligar is just so uncomfortable to work with, because once you've used Immunity Gligar, you just feel like such a fucking shitter for using, something that can get toxic again. And, Defog mandates that because of the incompatibility of, Defog immunity. However, it is still, I think, the most efficient singular Defog user. And, again, I have expressed distaste for Xatu on the whole, decent Pokemon, etc., 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 whatever, but it's not great. And Gligar is pretty awesome. It kind of, reinforces my freaking handle on fighters here. Also helps out with Salazzle. I know that, with a significant bulk investment, obviously I'm not 100 proof versus it, but because, Fire Z beats Gligar, Poison Z can beat Slowking, but the combination of those two, plus the fact that it kind of has to, throw a Z move mid-game to really push against my team, I think that I've got a decent handle on it between these two. 44 defensive Vs, if I'm recalling correctly, allows me to avoid the 2-hit KO from Machamp Facade from full, Adamant Machamp Facade from full. And this is actually one of those teams where, and it's not shown here, I used 30 speed IVs, which is something I've touched upon in the past. I think that it is very rare that this is actually a super useful tech, but in this case, the team that, it's very, pivot into nukes central, it's centralized around the concept of, pivoting into these nukes and going off with that. I think that it works rather well. And I guess I should touch upon the fact that, the fact that I have Cleric support, I have the Slowking, which can that can typically trap conventional Stealth Rock setters, such as the aforementioned Registeel and Bronzong. I can get away with Hyper Cutter Defog Gligar much easier than I thought, because much easier than is typically viewed, rather. And that's something that I think is important with these Defog Gligar teams, because the issue will always present itself that Gligar versus a, Protox Registeel, for instance, is probably going to lose that matchup. That is not a good matchup for it, so I think that a team that is looking to actively and most efficiently utilize a defucking Gligar should have some means of pushing that issue outside of the Gligar. You know, you could have the Gligar run Knockoff itself, for instance, and then run it with Cleric support. You can have another Pokemon knock off for it or try to trick it, or you can have, like what I have, you can have a Trapper that, you know, removes the conventional... Dude. Moving on from that, though, we have, and sorry if that, you know, doesn't come across super seamless, I had a little bit of an interruption, but hey, if it didn't show up, nice. I'm getting better at this. We have Noivern. Now, Noivern is a really interesting Pokemon. I think that, one that sees almost no use, and it's fairly understandable in that right, but I think that it is honestly a pretty good Pokemon right now. Not great, mind you, but it has a very unique niche to it right now that makes it, I think, a little bit, I don't want to say better than Swellow, who it always, you know, got that competition with, but I think it has a slightly broader niche than it right now, because Swellow, while it's a solid breaker and, you know, cleaner and whatnot, it's actually, no, that is the issue. It's not that solid of a breaker. Boom Burst is not as devastating a tool as you would like it to be, and for all its speed, I don't think that it usually offers something wholly unique to it in most cases. I think that, you know, with a Pokemon like that, you want it to be doubling as some kind of defensive utility in some very small way. It doesn't have to obviously, you know, like be pivoting into close combats or something like that. Like, I don't expect Gligar, as you can tell from the team, to be doing anything like that. But, how do I put this? I think that, you know, if you're going to have a Pokemon like that, it doesn't really fit onto the typical offenses most of the time, because it doesn't, the lock-ins that it will force are usually not wholly helpful for a team. Like, you can't afford to lock Boom Burst on a Registeel and then have it, you know, do whatever, throw a Toxic into your Pangoro or what have you. Because 9 times out of 10, that will be, you know, not something that's really great, of something that you want to be as, like, this kind of, like, fast, mid, like, weird hybrid of a breaker and a cleaner. It's just, it really is weird to fit onto teams. Whereas Noivern, I think that it's, you know, dragon typing, which is great for adding these, like, you know, extra resistances to stuff, like, you know, the quad resist to grass actually makes it, you know, be able to take grass attacks. It has that loose fire resist. It can pivot into a Salazzle, etc., etc., etc. Plus Switcheroo, I think, gives it this immense utility that typically Swellow lacks, and in particular, I wanted to capitalize on this for its ability to switch into Decidueye safely, which is a Pokemon that I've been alluding to being mildly weak to in the past, and I feel like this is a team where it could possibly, you know, exploit that. Umbreon, you to a non, you know, main, quote-unquote, because that term's bullshit, Umbreon would be like a decent check in most cases, but typically they are running a sub SD with Grass Z, which breaks through, you know, including this. Also, Beware, because I believe Z moves, you know, neutralize the Fluffy effect, or at least that's what the calcs would suggest when I ran them. I'm not sure if that's, you know, an official, like, thing, but that's what has been alluded to when I ran the numbers. So, you know, etc. And via Infiltrator, it's able to, you know, surpass the sub, pop it off, and with this investment I have here, the 32 HP and 20 defense, I am actually always living Jolly Spirit Shackle. Always living 2 Jolly Spirit Shackles from full, which is neat. And, you know, it's also good for sort of reinforcing my ability to handle that Salazzle just a little bit. It cleans, it beats. Switcheroo adds that flexibility that I am hoping for in the team, being able to switch off my specs onto a Registeel should that, initial trapping thing fall through, or, even an Umbreon or whatever works for it, I take it. And, so I'm running Dragon Pulse, actually, over the, I guess, more widely regarded Draco Meteor. I think that it is not necessarily better, but I don't like Hurricane Draco at all, because it really doesn't free him up for in-gaming as well. Like, I want something that can efficiently clean a team, and Hurricane serves just as much as my, nuke as Draco Meteor ever really did for me. And, otherwise, my endgame lock would be, either 70% Hurricane or non-stab Flamethrower, which is whack. So, yeah, that's kind of the general mentality behind Dragon Pulse. It really doesn't give it justice in this explanation, but, in-game application, I feel like it is a really solid pick, and I believe the speed is just Salazzle down, because there's really nothing of note past that. I mean, Rabombi exists, but it doesn't really exist, so, stuff like that happens, and I think that's, this is generally the most efficient spread for it. So, bearing all that in mind, I am going to switch over to the game. Alrighty, and here we go. So, as always, I'm fucking on this side. I don't know how this works. I really don't, but, yeah. So, looking at the team, there are, a lot of interesting things to note. That Decidueye right there. So, as I said, it is something that I was moderately aware of when building this team, but it is still a pretty freaking massive threat, and I'm going to have to play with that somewhat carefully. But once it expands its C-move, it becomes a lot less threatening, but it, might result in him having to, piece apart my team a bit. However, good things to note. Scavalier, looking brutal. Absolutely. His Megahorn switch-ins are not good. Bug resist of Camerupt, that takes, 70, 75 from, Banded Megahorn prior to Mega Evolving, about, 60 when it does. So that's not very good. Machamp, it takes ridiculous amounts. So there's that. Should the situation warrant, I can even Pursuit Scarnivore, which, restricts his whole, healing wish into this, that, and the other type mindset he took with that. But yeah, bearing that in mind, Slowking also looks really potent versus this team. Obviously, he has the Decidueye to scare it out, and if that's a Haze Milotic, it can be, pretty dangerous. Or not rather dangerous, but it can, neuter it in a lot of ways. However, I don't think that looking at this matchup, it looks like a Haze variant. I don't think that his team in particular mandates that. I'm expecting more of a Toxic Ice Beam type setup on a team like this, something to, restrict the spikes that it concedes to Chestnut. And obviously Toxic being just, run-of-the-mill good, helps him push through the crest, but, yeah, Slowking looks great. It is really only forced out by Decidueye. I can stay in on most things. I can do that, panic button, Hydro Vortex into the Machamp should the situation warrant it, etc., etc., etc. So, we got an interesting matchup for sure. I think that both players have a solid shot at this point in the, at this point in the game that hasn't started yet, obviously. Things that I need to note are Nidoqueen, fairly expendable in this matchup, honestly. If I can trap Bronzong or Milotic, if not both, which would be kind of impossible, I think, it can potentially, go in for a bit, but for the most part, I think that it will be, playing a role of, forcing this, that, and the other out, forcing, a Milotic to recover, for instance, and then pivoting around accordingly. I think that Umbreon, while nice, it's also a little bit expendable because, it is going to get overpowered by camera up most of the time. Like, the situation is kind of not great for it. It can maybe get through, but like, if it wants a toxic camera up, can punch through that, etc, etc. Machamp can come in, Milotic can kind of sit on it. It's not great for it. I think that, it'll be somewhat expendable, but it'll be useful for forcing the hand of certain Pokemon. But for the most part, I think I just need to, play it really tight. I think I have to, avoid giving him super free turns with his beaters and just punching through from there. And I think that will be kind of my key to clutching it. And looking at the matchup, really, I don't lose a whole lot from leading Slowking here. It matched up well versus pretty much everything but Decidueye, which I think he's going... I can't imagine him leading with because it just doesn't do much for him. It will... until it's given the free turn, it will be in a bad spot versus pretty much everything on the team, barring my Slowking. Just not a good look for him, so I'm going to lead that, and based off that, he leads off with freaking Bronzong. That's the Pokemon, other Steel type, not as commonly seen. I just call it Registeel. But I think that this is pretty much just the ideal time to pull the tech out. Obviously, there's a pretty good chance that he'll be running Psywave, which, for those of you that don't know, it does a randomized amount between 51 and 151 HP, which, has the potential to KO my 394 HP Slowking, but going by numbers, like, purely, the odds of him getting 3 rolls like that, 132 on average or higher numbers, is fucking ridiculous. So I'm just gonna outright go for it, and sure enough, I get it. So this is great for me because I can just instigate this sequence. I can force his hand and just boost up as much as I want, obviously to +6, because why would I not, and force him to either A, show Haze with Milotic, or B, forcing the Decidueye. And obviously picking this off is great because it frees up my Noivern a lot. It pretty much, he doesn't have a flying resist after this. So I'm just going to take on this sequence, and he is not rolling his, ridiculously high Psywaves. And he is, at this point, just going to concede to dying to this. I believe that he just stops going for Psywave, which, I don't know, like, fuck, why wouldn't you? I'm not gonna, it's not at the point where he would I would be trying to PP stall yet, but, whatever. So I'm just gonna, speed this up a little bit, go for it, and he, obviously closes on getting that Toxic off. That is, the most value he accepts he's going to get from that, and I go immediately to a Scavalier here, predicting him to try to throw something. I really didn't expect him to immediately go for this, but he does in fact commit to the sub, and now I just decide, hey, this is, where I'm going to trade my Umbreon. Now, I know that he has the Bloom Doom, but I'm not going to go for it because the risk presented by him doing something else is just a little too high for me, and I just decide to go ahead, go to Noivern, throw the Hurricane, and it, connects, which is fantastic. But, I think that, alright, obviously, his double was telegraphed pretty heavily. I doubted, well, realistically, I thought that his switch would either be, I thought that his switch would be Camropped. I predicted the Camropped as his double of choice because it covers my Scavalier, which he thought, like, oh, this is going to be the free Scavalier. But now I'm going to be playing rather conservatively with that Pokemon, and I go to Slowking. It'll cover, it can pivot into the Scarf Guard just fine. At minimal risk, I will be able to also catch this and get more value out of my Slowking. So I just fire off a Scald right here, and he goes to Milotic. I'm pretty confident from what he's shown that he will not be threatening in any way to me. So I just, keep him honest, throw the other Scald, as he does double into the Decidueye, and while he doesn't get I don't get the burn, which, it would have been nice to get rewarded like that, but hey, whatever though. This is important because it restricts him from subbing another time, because the HP on this Decidueye will be really important in this game, and I'm moderately aware of that at this stage in the game. Obviously, I'm not entirely sure how it'll pan out, but I know that that'll be important in that regard. So I just go hard into my Noivern. As I said, I take maximum like 49.8% from this Spirit Shackle. So he does go for it, and I take it, throwing off the Hurricane once more, because while again I'm risking a 70% accurate move, it is vacuously my ideal play, but yeah. So at this point I decide to go to my Gligar, because he can't set up Stealth Rock anymore. I know that from my position it'll be important to keep Stealth Rock off the field, and having the fodder in my Noivern is great, and ideally, I can throw off another freaking Hurricane into something. So I go to my Gligar knowing that I can take whatever, even if he does decide to predict, I can take a hit and go for the Defog. So I go for the Defog, he crits me, really doesn't matter, it's, irrelevant because I'd be foddering it there, and go for the Earthquake for some chip. I get a crit, it really doesn't come into play. I needed just enough damage for it to be into Nidoqueen Sludge range, which I go for. And yeah, so I go for it again, actually, because if he decided to, make any double, he wouldn't go for any double there. It was more in the case that he tried to throw a Scald, trying to keep one of my Pokemon honest, which I think at that point was a fairly valid play. Not great though, but I know that my Queen, should I have gone through with this, was not as valuable for his HP, but he does end up going for his Recover, so I decide, okay, now at this point it is totally fine, I am not going to gain anything from this, and I just go for a Scald. No, I don't. I double to my Scavalier, predicting his Decidueye, and shoot, I suck. But then I throw that Mega Horn, and as I said, that did fucking millions. And knowing that he's going to go for his, this is kind of, maybe a little bit of me stunting, but I think that I would interpret it as getting maximum value out of my team. But knowing that he would throw the Fire Blast here as a means, because it's more important to him to keep the Noivern from getting it for free than it is to, Earth Power predicting the Slowking to try to 2-hit KO that. So I go Slowking, and then I double out into my Noivern, predicting him to throw the Earth Power, and this, again, is not where I commit to Hurricane, because I know I've been playing my ads a little too much at this point, and I just go for that. And now, at this point, when I don't have any Gligar, I don't have anything to, definitively take that hit and outspeed afterwards, I decide this is the point to sack it, and at this point is where I decide I'm going to commit to this sequence of odds, and I thought I'd just, explain this real quick, because I know how this sequence is going to play out. I know how Shake is going to play this, because he is going to play to, his best odds possible in this situation. What I need right now is to not get burned on the first Scald. The second Scald, not as important for me, and I'll touch upon that later. But, I need to hit this Mega Horn through the first Scald, not get burned on that one, and then proceed to hit the Decidueye as it tries to sub down for a dodge. I know that this is the sequence he's going to go for because those are his best odds to win at this point in the game. I know that these are my best odds at this point in the game. So, if I get the if he gets the skulls on the second one, it really doesn't matter because at that point, Decidueye is dying regardless. It is at 60, and Escavalier is really strong. Banded Meghorn will still do that 60%. So I just need not to burn the first time, so Milotic can then, try to, recover cycle to stall me out. So I'm just going to commit to the sequence because it is my best odds, and he is going to play to his best odds. So when this happens, I think that my audience knows well enough to say, like, oh, odds fishing, it's some kind of cowardly thing. No, it's trying to win a tour game, obviously. So, anyway, end up not getting Scald Burned whatsoever as he goes for the sub, trying to get his best odds in this game, and I believe, he just does go for this over the Spirit Shackle, kills me off, and this is actually where that situation came in. I am slower than his Jolly Doodad. I know that I can take any one hit from him, and would have been fine, but there it is. I take the Bullet Punch, I survive both the hits, and I end up winning the game with a real narrow 2-0. And I like this game a lot. I thought it was really cool. I think that Shake played really well, honestly. And it's a shame that he is at the record he is at, but I think that, clearly he has been expressing that he is a very solid player throughout his games. I don't think that his record is indicative of his skill. And I think that, it's definitely been a really weird one, especially with, me actually doing okay. I'm 3-0 after this game, which is stupid. I don't think... I mean, I'm glad, and I think I'm partially deserving, but I would never have, I personally would not have expected me to perform at this capacity, so I can only imagine what other people think. As well as Soul Gazer being the other 3-0. So, after this week, it's definitely interesting, and I'm just kind of excited to see where it goes from there, because, recording this now, not many games have gone on, because RU players, as honestly most players are, pretty hardcore Johns, so I will be, catching you the next time around, and thank you for watching, guys. Hopefully this was a little bit better, and maybe with my next ones I will improve even more. We shall see, and you have a great day.